I came across a story in the last few days of Dr. Frederick Brandt, who is also known as the Baron of Botox, and he apparently redefined cosmetic dermatology forever, bringing in things like, or normalizing things like Botox and fillers. And I thought, let's go to the source. Our guest expert is Dr. Stephen Mulholland, founder of Spa Medica, one of Canada's top cosmetic plastic surgeons. Hi, Dr. Mulholland. Thanks for doing this.
Barb, thanks for having me on. An interesting story.
Well, it is interesting because I thought to myself, Dr. Brandt would probably be, would have been a little like older than you, but were you familiar with him as you were coming up through the ranks?
Well, first of all, Dr. Brandt looked about 30 years younger because he was a self-injector, so he looked awesome. And he died when he was about 65 a few years ago. And I knew him well. I'd met him several times.
Oh.
He truly was a true visionary of what we now accept as commonplace, which is using injectables, soft tissue fillers, and neuromodulators, Botox, to do what surgery used to be the exclusive purvey of in the 90s. In the late 80s and early 90s, he really took this new thing, Botox, and the new fillers, and was creating facial shape when other doctors were thinking about just stopping a line or a movement or an animation. So he truly was a visionary.
That's really interesting. I had no idea that you knew him.
Yeah, I'd met him quite a few times. We'd had dinner several times. He had an influence on my career because he was such a visionary. As that plastic surgeon who was at the time used to, I've trained with scalpels. I need a scalpel to make a change. I really, in watching him and a couple other dermatologists at the time, but mainly Fred Brandt, I realized, wow, a lot of patients are going to love this because they don't need surgery, and we can customize a bespoke shape to their face, one they'd never had or one they used to have and want, really customize it more than a scalpel could. And so he was the first one to turn me on to the non-invasive space in the late 80s, early 90s, and by 97 I opened up Spa Medica, principally on the concept founded by Brandt that it was kind of where medicine meets medical spa treatments without surgery.
That's really, really fascinating. When reading this story about him, I got the impression, and it could be wrong, I know he was a dermatologist to many stars, but I also got the sense that he was somewhat mocked, not just for that TV show, but almost like, I guess because, as you said, he would try out stuff on himself. Did people mock his appearance? Do you know?
Well, he was very, like most real geniuses, he was kind of very iconic, whether it's a musician or an artist, or he was a very talented guy, and he wanted to try on himself a lot of these products because they were new. He wanted to see the effect. And yeah, he did have that Frederick Brandt look, kind of a smooth, unanimated, but, pleasantly proportioned face, which typically you didn't see guys in the late 80s, 90s like that. He was truly one of a kind, and he became kind of a caricature of himself. And I think, unfortunately, he was suffering from depression, so it's good you're talking to the psychiatrist, Ness. And, it's famously quoted that Tina Fey and Martin Short killed him because of this parody they did on their show. But he was unfortunately suffering from real depression, and he was on a suicide watch at the time, and he was in a very bad way. It wasn't the show itself. I think he, fragile minds of the geniuses, it affects that area of your serotonin and dopamine production. And he was just a very depressed guy for the last couple of years. But he was a genius, and he was way ahead of his time, and he really marshaled in and heralded in this injectable rejuvenation of the face.
It's sort of stated that before he really did that, aside from invasive cosmetic surgery, the most that you could really do would be something like microdermabrasion, where I didn't realize he sort of brought in the whole wave of all of this stuff that even young people now are very into.
Yeah, he was a pioneer in taking these products, fillers and Botox, and using Botox not just to stop a line, but to shape a face, and taking fillers not to just to plump out a smile line or lip, but change the architecture and structure of the face. And he was one of the early thinkers of that. And I took that and worked with it myself. And I did a live injection facelift. I called it the Volume Lift on the Today Show Live, based upon some of the principles that I learned from Frederick Brandt.
Do you recall, he died in 2015. Do you recall when you heard about it, what you thought?
Yeah, I remember that one of the colleagues called me, one of the dermatologists I knew in South Florida, that he had hung himself, and it was just, it's like Robin Williams, a genius, hangs himself because he's depressed. So I remember thinking, what a sad loss. He was only 65 at the time, of a great dermatologist, a guy with a lot of great human qualities, a real pioneer, who had another good 25, 30 years in him. But because he wasn't able to grapple with the real demons, which were not Tina Fey and Martin Short, but mental illness, we lost a really great mind.
Right. I mean, look, a lot was made about that at the time because they had a character in their show that was called Dr. Grant.
It was definitely a parody of Dr. Brunt, but that wouldn't have been enough to kill him. He was just depressed. And he had been depressed before it and after it.
Yeah, and I had a sense from reading the story, he almost like, well, you keep saying genius. It's like that sort of, that visionary, like the Steve Jobs. Like, we don't see people like that come along very often. Would you put him in that category?
I would say there's different levels of genius. He was a visual, and I was a visual genius, I think, on take what is genius. Genius is seeing things that might be obvious to others. Theory of relativity, the Earth isn't flat. So just things that would seem obvious to us now, but it takes someone to think another way. So looking at Botox and filler, another way of looking at how these impact upon human face and form, and then creating a science out of that. There's a genius to that. So maybe, you're throwing the term around loosely sometimes. I think he qualifies. Dr.
Mulholland, thank you for this.
We never got to fat, cool slurries.
Oh, we're going to have you back next week about that. Okay. I totally forgot. I got caught up in the Baron of Botox.
So the fat slurry.
We will do that to be continued next week if we can find a time for you. Thank you.
Thanks again. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Appreciate it. He is, he's busy. Was he at a restaurant or something? He's such a busy social life. And we love that he comes on with us. We really appreciate it. Dr. Stephen Mulholland, founder of Spa Medica, one of Canada's top cosmetic plastic surgeons.
This Newstalk 1010 podcast was brought to you by PocketEmploymentLawyer.ca. Wrongfully dismissed, changes made to your job, lowballed on severance? Find out if you have a case before you call a lawyer. Go to PocketEmploymentLawyer.ca.